Paul's vision here also addresses a third decision that we need to think about, and it's the question of protection. At the center of that marketplace in Corinth, there's a raised platform called a bema. They're found in cities throughout the Greco-Roman world. It was a place that would allow rulers to address the people, right, particularly in legal matters. So some translations say tribunal, that's what the ESV says. Some say judgment seat. And we just read Paul's vision from the Lord, that the Lord promised him protection. He said that he would be with Paul and that no one would attack him to harm him. But I think Paul's faith in that promise is put to the test, because we continue in Acts 18, verses 12 through 13, and it tells us, but when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, "This man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law." So, to read it here, it sounds as if God promised no attack and then an attack happens. But that's not entirely accurate. I think maybe the translation here and some other translations contribute to that misperception. The word back in verse 10 refers to more of a physical assault, to set upon someone. But the term here in verse 12 talks about a group rising up. And so, they're seizing Paul and bringing him before them, but they're bringing a charge, but he's not technically in danger yet. He's not being physically attacked quite yet. I'm sure that he's still praying and wondering how the Lord is going to work this out and protect him while all this is going on. But the charge against him requires maybe a little bit of explanation. His accusers certainly believe that worshiping Jesus violates the Mosaic law. Right? We can understand why they might think that. If they don't accept that Jesus is the Son of God, then worshiping him would seem to violate the first commandment, worshiping another God. But a Roman official wouldn't really care about that in and of itself. What does he care about Jewish commandments? So the basis for their charge against Paul here is that Judaism was officially tolerated by the Romans. And so if they can prove that Christianity is not a Jewish sect, but an entirely different religion, then it will be seen as a violation of Roman law. So I think that's what they're getting at. As proconsul, Gallio's authority stretched far beyond the city of Corinth. As it mentions there, he ruled the entire province of Achaia. In fact, his prominence allows us to identify the time of his rule. His name appears on an inscription up in the ancient city of Delphi that places his time in power there between AD 51 and AD 52. So it's one of these key chronological anchors in looking at the New Testament that we know that this trial of Paul happened during that time period. And that Gallio's judgment would set a precedent for other provinces throughout the empire. And he was a high enough official that it would be significant. So how does he respond? We keep reading. Acts 18, verses 14 through 17 says, "But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, 'If it were a matter of wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. But since it's a matter of questions about words and names and your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of these things.' And he drove them from the tribunal, from that bema. And it says they all seized Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal, but Gallio paid no attention to any of this." So Paul never has to say a word. The Lord does protect him in this situation. And the decision also probably gives Christians in the Roman Empire some degree of legal protection moving forward, at least for the next decade. But verse 17 there at the end reminds us that we can't necessarily place our faith in government or in people. Some say that Sosthenes was beaten by Greeks or Romans who were annoyed at the Jews, but the grammar of the text suggests that it was his fellow Jews who turned against him when their case failed. But they vented their anger on him. And yet here's Gallio, right, the Roman authority, and he couldn't care less. This reminds us our sovereign Lord is our true protector. That doesn't mean that we should be reckless, but as Jesus was sending out his apostles, Matthew 10:29-31 tells us, he said, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore. You're of more value than many sparrows." Do we believe that? God's the one who protects us. Does it factor into the decisions that we make? Or do we get sucked up into all the fear-mongering in our world? Now, you might assume that Paul, being the apostle that he is, would never be tempted to worry. And yet, he's human. I'm sure his heart was beating hard when he's getting dragged before this tribunal. And I think the next verse, Acts 18:18, suggests that maybe he did something to remind himself of the Lord's promise. Luke tells us after this, Paul stayed many days longer and then took leave of the brothers and set sail for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila. At Cenchreae, he had cut his hair, for he was under a vow. Now, when Jews wanted to be particularly devoted to the Lord for a period of time, they would make a Nazirite vow. It's described in Numbers chapter 6. It explains that they wouldn't drink wine or cut their hair. Luke doesn't tell us when or why Paul made this vow, but I suspect that he did so in response to the promise he received from the Lord in his vision. Think about it. Whenever he was tempted to worry, he could feel his hair, look in a mirror, and be reminded that God was protecting him. And so when he decides to leave Corinth, when that's time, he goes down to the port nearby. That's Cenchreae. It's right near Corinth there. And he cuts his hair in celebration of the Lord's faithfulness. I mean, we should all celebrate the Lord's protection like that, right? Remembering all the times that bad things haven't happened to us.